Hello, everyone. My name is Sashawna Donaldson, the programmer for the Luminal Theater, and welcome to our conversation with Jamila Wignot, director of Ailey. Jamila Wignot's directing work includes the series The African Americans, Many Rivers to Cross, which won the Peabody Award, the Emmy Award, and the NCAA Image Award. Town Hall, a documentary portrait of the Tea Party activists, Peabody Award-winning Triangle Fire, and Emmy-nominated Walt Whitman. Wigman's producing credits include W. Kamau Bell's Bring the Rain, Musa Saeed's Astray, and W. Net's The Supreme Court, The Rehnquist Revolution, and IDA Best Limited Series winner. So thank you for being with us today, Jamila.
Thank you for having me.
And just on a personal note, I've been dancing since I was 8 years old. Primarily ballet and modern. And one of the first prominent figures I remember learning about that really stood out to me was Alvin Ailey. And, my whole life, I've just had this emotional and spiritual connection to dance. So being here, just having this discussion with you today really means a lot. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that background about yourself. I love that.
Thank you. Thank you. So I know your time is very limited. I know you're very busy right now, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into it.
Perfect.
That works for you. Okay. So what motivated you to make a full-length documentary about the life of Alvin Ailey?
Well, actually, I was approached by Insignia Films, the production company who worked with me on making the film. And they, came to me saying, we're looking for a director. We're familiar with their work. I knew them because we all had worked in public media together. And then they said Alvin Ailey, and it was like a no-brainer. Like the minute they said his name, I immediately was transported back to the first performance I ever saw of the company, which actually was late. It was in college. I'm not a dancer. I don't come from a family that's super repping the arts in any way. And, kind of like what you said, it just was this incredibly emotional and visceral evening for me. Every one of the works. And then of course, Revelation sort of stays in your brain. It just felt like it hit something very deep and personal. For me, I had never really seen anything like it. And so, just having that great love for the company and for the work and this kind of early exposure, I was all in. So then we went to the company and basically told them, look, we'd love to do a biographical portrait of your founder. And there wasn't really a full portrait told in this way. There had been a few other films made about him. A wonderful film made by the great Orlando Bagwell, a few years after Mr. Ailey had passed. But we really wanted to kind of come into it and look at the company on the eve of its 60th anniversary and think about his vision and his legacy and why the company remains as vibrant as it does today, and think about who he was that allowed for that to be possible.
Right. And as a person too, he, even outside of dance, he lived from the documentary, he lived a very colorful life, and you can see that kind of present itself in his work. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something that was a discovery for me in the making of it, because, I immediately have a really rigorous research practice at the top of, all the films that I work on. And I didn't know the kind of intimate side of him, and being able to have access to these audio recordings of interviews he conducted, in the last years of his life really was this kind of insight of kind of where it all began for him and how he became the artist that he was. So that was really special.
Right. Yeah. Definitely seeing that, the background, the I guess the interviews, the never before seen or heard interviews.
Okay. No, I understand those audio recordings, as you say, are kind of side to him that I don't think we've really had much exposure.
And just that's what it was. It's such a dynamic character, and even from his childhood and the trajectory of his life, starting from nothing and becoming this larger than life figure. So yeah, no, that was really very powerful. So, yes, was it difficult to gain access to Ailey's colleagues that were interviewed? And so at the Luminal, we're very big on sharing archive, and especially the Black archive. So what was your process in obtaining such rare footage?
Oh man, this is such a good question. And I'm so glad that you guys have that emphasis and focus. I love archive. I came up in as an archival researcher. That was my first work as a in the documentary industry. So it's a great question. Yes, gaining access. I think we came with a kind of track record in terms of filmmaking that was important for the company. I don't think that they, had any doubts about our capacity to make the film. But these are people all the way from Carmen de Lavalade, who he was friends with in high school, who he danced with in the earliest years of his company, to Miss Jamison, Miss Sylvia Waters. Like, all these people have really dedicated their lives to keeping his legacy and his mission alive. And so I think they just needed to feel a certain amount of trust that we were going to serve him right and tell his story right, and treat him, with respect and dignity. Be honest, of course. I think everybody wanted an honest portrait. But I think, just understanding what a treasure he was and remains to be was very important to them. And so there was just a lot of conversations there. And then, we actually started our process a little bit reverse. We started filming the rehearsals, the present day rehearsals first, and then went back and conducted all of our interviews. And in hindsight, I didn't think about it at the time, but it kind of worked out because basically they could see us at work and they would hear feedback from Rennie Harris, the choreographer. So I think it was actually a way to kind of dip our toe in and give them a sense of who we were and how we were going to approach just being in their space and honoring their dancers today, and a process. So that was great. And in terms of the archive, I mean, man, as I said, I started in this industry almost 20 years ago. And I think there has just been such an amazing, and I'm so, so, so grateful, such an amazing effort on the parts of places like the NMAHC, the Blacksonian, as I like to call it, and other smaller archives, to really go out and find documentation of Black life beyond, how people labor or the kind of conditions of oppression, like really looking at the home movie footage that we were able to show in the collection, just sort of scenes of everyday Black life, Black joy, that they have found these archives, they have preserved, and then made them, really accessible to us today. I don't think this film could have been made even 5 years ago, just because of what was available. And, certainly we were doing our editorial process during the pandemic. So we couldn't even physically go to the sites of some of these archives. So the fact that so much of it has been digitized is amazing. And I got to give a shout out to the Black Archives, blackarchives.co, their Instagram site. If you don't follow them, you should, because they were such a source of, as I say, finding these just beautiful, joyful reminders of how Black life is lived, which is distinct, I think, from the struggle. And it's really a huge part of the film is to try to see that that is an incredible resource and a source of wealth and a source of inspiration for Mr. Ailey's work. And so we really wanted the film to really show that and showcase that.
And do you know where these archived information, do you know where they were sourced from, or where they were pulled from? Or
Yeah. A huge wide range. A lot of the Texas imagery is from what is it called? TAMI, the Texas Archive of Moving Images. Duke University has a huge collection of materials now. There's actually a white filmmaker, Ailey Waters, whose collection was digitized and processed. And what he would do, he was going around from town to town across North Carolina, and he was filming in Black towns and in white towns. And then he would create these sort of little newsreels that would show in the local movie theater before whatever the sort of main feature was. Mm-hmm. So those were really interesting. The MoMA has a collection of archives that we were able to access. And then, as I said, the Blacksonian holding it down is a great resource, but really just like a wide swath of archives that we were able to pull and source from. And then really looking at like, how were people being documented, particularly when it was a white filmmaker doing the filming? In what ways were the people in the frame maybe resisting certain ways in which they were aimed to be filmed, or just sort of showing themselves in different ways? I think we were very selective in, even within a particular archival piece, finding the moments where I think people were being truer to themselves. Oh, and I should say also shout out some of the footage that we're also using is filmed by Nora Zornil Hurston in very early, both some ethnographic works that she did, as well as a beautiful film she shot of a community in South Carolina. So that stuff was like wonderful.
So speaking of like the footage from when it was depicting his life in Texas, do you know circa what time frame that footage is from?
Yeah, so that was the other choice that we made. Mr. Aileys' work was informed, as he says in the film, by something called, he calls it his blood memories, these memories of his mother, his grandparents, and I think he means that in the deepest possible sense of a kind of Black diasporic experience, right? It's the blood memories of the whole piece. And in both Rennie's dance work, if you see the full piece, that was really a source of inspiration for him, like memory and rooting his work in memory. And we really took that in a sort of how that influenced our visual approach was that we opened ourselves up to like a broad swath of materials. So some of our footage is from like 1920s, which would have been contemporaneous, close to contemporaneous with Mr. Aileys' life. He was born in 1931. So some of our footage is period accurate. Other footage is from later, like the 40s, the 50s, and 60s, because we were interested in showing like a continuity of an experience in our footage. And also, as I say, like kind of creating what is a visual version of a blood memory look like using archival materials. So that was kind of a point of interest for us.
It was very beautifully done. So
thank you.
I really appreciate it. Where should I go? One of the most affecting parts of the documentary for me was when Ailey was experiencing turmoil in his professional and personal life. And I especially love how the footage looked like it was being played in reverse. So creative wise, can you share the significance on why you chose to portray those images in that way, or the film at that point in that way?
Yeah. So that actually happened when we were workshopping that was an early scene that we cut in our sample materials, actually. When we were trying to hustle to raise some money to make the film. And it was that at some point we start with a kind of a dance solo that Mr. Ailey has. When we cut that scene, we run the dance solo in reverse as he's starting to talk about, his mind unraveling from the pressures of, I think, moving away from the man who he was and where he came from and kind of achieving this iconic status, and there being a really great distance between those 2 points, and the kind of difficulty in managing that. So we ran that in reverse, and then somehow just seeing that kind of opened up a possibility for us to think about, what does it feel like when the world isn't making sense to you anymore? So much of this film was trying to place ourselves in his experience, trying to visualize, give visual meaning to the words that he was saying. And so we sort of just took that as a departure point of like, oh, we can actually start to have the whole thing sort of unravel, if you will. And then we just decided, let's try to see what it feels like if we run this footage in reverse. And we did, and we just really loved.
Yeah. That was it, and it really made you feel the kind of the emotion behind it, like the confusion, the disconnect, just kind of trying to find your footing, I guess. So I think that was a very strong portrayal of what could have been going on, in it mentally, in his mind, and, in his heart. So
Yeah.
that was very strong for me. One of my favorite aspects of your filmmaking style is how you incorporated the present day company and how it evolved from what Mr. Ailey established, so many years ago, so many decades ago, really. So in what way do you think Alvin Ailey has affected contemporary performance art and popular culture today?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. Yeah, we right from the beginning knew that we wanted to incorporate a present day through line in the story because the company is still alive, and well and vibrant today. They're still touring all over the world. Well, they were before the pandemic. And so that was really important to us. And I think the thing that's that was part of his vision and mission was the idea that like people didn't have to do his dance style. They didn't have to perform his dance language. So, he invites somebody like a Bill T. Jones, who is from a kind of more experimental avant-garde world, into the company to set work so that he, Mr. Ailey, could use the platform he had at that time and give pull Bill T. Jones up or make space for Bill T. Jones as a choreographer. And I think that's the same thing that's happening with Rennie Harris, who has a very thriving, incredible company of his own. But the company invites him in to set work on the company, both I think because it gives the dancers themselves, like it broadens their dance vocabulary to be doing something beyond modern and ballet, which is kind of what their sort of foundation is. But also I think he was really concerned or invested rather in the idea that the audiences who came to the theaters be exposed to the widest possible range of dance. And so that idea of incorporating the present day is, I think, just part of an extension of Mr. Ailey's vision.
Okay, thank you. So I don't know if it's because I'm connected to the art form, but when I see Revelations, like it really, I don't know, it's like very emotionally triggering to me every time I see it. And you said you don't necessarily have a background in dance.
No.
What is the emotion? What does when you see Revelations, what does that kind of trigger for you?
Yeah, thank you. I think I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I've been thinking about even the way that I conceived of or thought about Mr. Ailey's life in the beginning of the project and how it's changed, and that is connected to his work and kind of how even experiencing his work is a little bit different, or I'm closer to the core of that essential feeling that it gives you, which is that I think we tend to think of you can look at like the biographical facts of Mr. Ailey's life, right? So he's like a Black boy born in Jim Crow, Texas, to a single mother. They live this very kind of nomadic life as she's searching for work to keep the family alive. He's gay. And it's like he's outside of the outside of the outside. Like, depending on your gaze, you will see him as this ultimate outsider. But that's only in relationship to the mainstream culture. And I think what was so powerful about him was he was the ultimate insider of the space which centered him, which was Black culture. And so his work is derived from a site of extraordinary wealth. We just don't think about it as wealth because that's not how our society is structured, to think about love and caring and family as wealth. And so I think the thing that's so powerful about Revelations and that what you feel is the love that's at the center of that. And like the power of that love, the power of that community to carry you and sustain you. And it's about where his gaze is located. He's not looking over here to be a part of over here. He's saying, I'm a part of something right here in front of me, and it is beautiful. And like, you can come to me.
Definitely, yeah. I was just thinking that like it's so strong and it's so powerful that even though it's like this outside group of society, it kind of forces, you know, everything around it to kind of stop and, you know, kind of focus in on that. So
yeah. I mean, I just want to add to that. You know, he says in his own words, he's like talking about going to the Dewdrop Inn, this juke joint in, you know, Rogers, Texas, and he says, you know, very important. This is where we could let it all hang out. Like that is what I'm talking about. Like whether it's the juke joint or it's church, it's like, this is a space where you can just be. And then look what happens when you have that space. And the beauty and the joy and the love.
And when you take pride in it too. Yeah, and when and it's not like you're not treating it as, you know, an outside kind of entity. Like it's you're engulfed in it and it's your own, and it forces everything else to kind of turn into it, you know, like, yeah.
Right. And it's a space of like real universal human experience.
Yeah, authentic.
Which is why I think you and I will have a certain kind of relationship to the work and an experience, but that everybody feels it. It's so powerful because it's really getting like right at the source. So yeah, I mean, I hope we can stop thinking about, it's a lesson for me to like stop thinking about this idea of lack and being less than or having to prove yourself, you know? It's like start thinking about the wealth that's all around you.
That's what I was just going to say. So another thing that really stood out to me was the catalyst of his friend's death. And the, you know, his relationship going south, and just how it kind of took this giant of an icon and brought him down to his knees. I'm wondering, does anyone know like who this lover of his was, or is he kind of he is known?
He is not. I mean, his name was Abdullah. He was a young man that Mr. Ailey met overseas, and he brought him to New York. And the relationship, I think, wasn't. I mean, it's questionable about the reasons that Abdullah was interested in Mr. Ailey. And yes, nobody really met him. And for those people that did meet him, they met him like one time. I mean, Mr. Ailey was sort of deeply private in that way. And so it didn't work out. And it is an interesting thing. It's like, he's very beautiful to me in that moment, because he knows that he hasn't built a life for himself. And now he's like, oh my gosh, I got to try. And like a lot of us, like he kind of picks the wrong person, you know? So I think it makes him extremely relatable. And it's like, if you think to the sort of the way we frame from the film from the beginning, like there's enormous sacrifices that he made in order to birth this extraordinary institution. And his personal life is one of them. So, but yeah, I don't know where Abdullah is today.
Okay. I was just, yeah, that really, like, I wasn't expecting that, you know, just watching the film, and it was just like, oh, wow, this kind of, you know, tragedy came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But yes, thank you so much for your time.
Sashawna, thank you.
And thank you for your patience with me. This is my first time moderating, so.
No, it's beautiful. And thank you to the Luminal, because I've been to some of your events in Bed-Stuy, and I really love what you all do. And so I just like, I hope that in a future, when we all have the vaccine, we can like move forward and find ways to collaborate again.
Find some type of normalcy in this craziness. Well, all the best, and thank you again.